Hey, this is Sanyam Bhutani, and you're listening to Chai Time Data Science, a podcast for data science enthusiasts where I interview practitioners, researchers, and Kagglers about their journey, experience, and talk all things about data science.
Hello and welcome to another episode of CTDS.Show. This is again a different style of an interview. In this episode, I interview Andrey Kurenkov, PhD student at Stanford AI and Vision Lab. This interview is sort of a more critical take on research and different aspects of Andrey's research. We talk about what he's learned about research while going through grad school. We discuss all about his failures. He's been kind enough to make an amazing video, which I encourage you to check out. You can find it in the show notes. We talk about Andrey's process of writing. Andrey has written some amazing articles on Gradient. You can go ahead and check them out if you'd like. All of them will be there in the show notes. We also discuss about his research interest and his approach to research problems. Andrey shares one golden advice, which is the most important thing in AI research or practice is perseverance. With that advice, here's the conversation. Please enjoy the show. Hi everyone, I'm really excited to be talking to Andrey Kurenkov. Andrey, thank you so much for joining me on CTDS.Show.
Thank you for having me.
There are a lot of things that I want to talk to you about, but I want to start by asking you what led you to taking the decision of pursuing AI, broadly speaking?
Broadly speaking, I guess I just found it really interesting and fun to work on. It was, kind of a natural progress of I was looking what to focus on for a while in high school and undergrad. And then when I took my first Intro to AI course in my second year of undergrad, I was just found it really cool. That led me to my first research internship in a robotics lab. And then I sort of just kept going with it and stuck with it, I guess.
I read that, or maybe I heard on a podcast that your robotics roots trace back to your high school days. You had taken a summer camp on robotics.
Close, yeah. I was in the first program where first is this competition for high schoolers to build a robot to compete in this little competition game. And I was on a programming team, so I did very simplest AI and manageable back in the day. But it's, kind of got me started on that path.
Gotcha. And today you're at Stanford. Can you tell us more about your research focus? And you're at the AI lab. Can you tell us more about the lab?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm in the Stanford Vision and Learning Lab in the subgroup of it focused on robotics, which is PAIR, people, AI, and robotics. So we focus primarily on leveraging learning techniques to enable robots to interact with the real world, broadly speaking, which is kind of a popular subfield now within AI. We focus more on let's say an intersection of techniques for trying to teach robots to deal with very messy kind of real world problems where you need to perceive the world. You have sort of an RGB, camera input, and you need to figure out how to move objects out of the way or stack them or clean them up or whatever you want to do with this sensing where you don't necessarily have a very clean environment, which is where robotics is sort of traditionally good at. My research has touched on kind of a few aspects of this. I guess most recently my focus has been on this idea of, broadly speaking, a lot of learning in robotics is sort of trial and error, right? So you have your robot try to do it, it fails, and then it should learn what works and what doesn't. And that's a very slow process because there's a lot of ways to fail and not very many ways to get it right. So my research is been thinking about, let's say you can actually hard code, just as a programmer, write something that is kind of okay at whatever you want to do. It's not perfect, but it sort of does part of it well. Then how can we use this to help the robot out in learning in a principled way so that it learns way faster? It has to fail way less in the process.
Okay. And are you specifically, your research is looking at niche applications of robotics, or are they broad aspects that you're looking at?
It's a mix. So yeah, I kind of go back and forth a little bit. Of part of it is more kind of broad techniques, like this idea of learning with guidance from hard-coded things. And then I do have some papers on this problem of mechanical search, which is essentially searching for an object in an environment with a robot, which is fairly applied in the sense of you may want to do this in a warehouse or an office or something. So yeah, we do try to go back and forth between inventing techniques and then applying them, ensuring they're useful for something concrete.
Okay, makes sense. Now, I had a misconception about people doing PhD or postdocs. I assume they're really smart people, very successful people that are just solving problems left and right. And I realized through your video where you were very honest about your failures, that you had gone through a lot of failures even during your PhD days. What's one good thing that's come out of it? I'll have the video link for anyone who wants to check it out. But any good unexpected thing that has come out of your recent work?
I think the most unexpected thing is sort of all the stuff besides research, I suppose. I mean, going into a PhD, you expect you'll be doing a lot of research, and writing papers and reading papers and all that. But one of the other nice things is you do have time to sort of make your own priorities as to what aspects of academic work you value. So in my case, I quite enjoy other kind of pursuits, like having the Gradient, which is this sort of communal effort to have a platform for writing non-papers about AI.
Yeah.
And I also have Skynet Today, which is communicating the state of AI to the public in a easy way to access. So yeah, having this freedom to pick and choose your priorities and do things that aren't just research, on top of doing research, has been a nice thing. And that's something you get with a PhD, is the freedom to craft your own path, so to speak.
I'm sure it also takes a lot of discipline. What does a day in your life on non-pandemic days? What does a day in your life look like?
Yeah, well, non-pandemic days, that it's hard to remember now, but yeah, I mean, usually, I guess it's not too unusual. I go into the office. We have, at least at Stanford, we have our own kind of desk. Usually we have shared offices with a few other people. And then, generally speaking, there's some work I'm trying to get around to as far as writing something or coding something. So that's kind of most of the day is trying to be productive on my own. And then there's also meetings quite often to brainstorm or check in about things. Yeah, so I would say maybe 30% reading and thinking about things, 60% writing code or trying things out or looking at what's not working and debugging, and then like 10% meetings and discussion.
And another video that I really enjoyed of yours was what you've learned through grad school. In that, you've also mentioned how do you approach problems. So, how do you approach problems today? If you get inspiration to work on a project or a research idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it depends on what kind of problem. So if you're debugging code, that's something where, it's a pretty universal skill, and it's a little different in AI, but you can still do some of the same tricks of, go down to a base case, really dig down, keep going through it. In AI, there's a kind of problem where when you're trying out a new algorithm, you never know if it's a bug in your code or if it's just the idea itself is not working. So that kind of compounds the difficulty. But yeah, I guess it's a process of just you cancel out all the hypotheses. So you say, okay, maybe this is broken. Let me double check this is not broken with some sanity check test to verify it's doing what I think it's doing. And then eventually, after you do enough of these very kind of close inspections of various aspects of whatever you're doing, you end up deciding that one hypothesis seems most likely, and then you have to figure out quite often what's in your approach is not correct.
And how about if you want to work on a fresh idea, or if you're just trying to experiment with a new implementation, how does that pipeline look like?
Yeah, so that's actually a lot of the research timeline, is when you have a new project or a new idea, kind of fleshing it out and getting it to a point of actually trying something. And that usually takes a while. It always starts with reading a lot of papers and just seeing what's out there and what's similar, and where is the missing piece that you can contribute. So after, let's say, a month of reading and thinking and not doing much else, you hopefully kind of have this sort of soup of ideas and what's been done before in your head. And I think usually it's just kind of a process of thinking about it a lot until something clicks and you get an idea, and then the idea seems interesting, and then you do even more reading to verify the idea makes sense. And if the idea seems to make sense, then you can actually finally go and implement it and try it.
Makes sense. I've read all of your articles, really enjoyed every single one of them, both on the ones on Gradient and the ones off Gradient. Can you tell us more about your writing process? What things do you enjoy writing about, and more about the process?
Sure. Yeah, I'm flattered you actually read through all these things. My writing process is, I think, fairly conventional. I try to, I usually get an idea and I jot it down somewhere, and then I rarely, but sometimes get around to actually writing down some of these ideas. And at that point, I tend to just want to write a quick draft, like a quick, messy draft, just kind of, people have this expression of like vomit out whatever you have.
Yeah.
And I think it's true. You just have to like not be self-critical and just start writing. And then after you've written down one version, you just rewrite it, 15 times or something until you think it looks good. So that's, pretty much always my process. And these days, I think I have less time for fun writing, unfortunately, but every once in a while I do get around to it, and it's still how I do it.
I hope I get to read more of your articles, but you've also written a few critical articles on Gradient, and these discuss major issues with ethics and even with research. How do you think we can solve the issue with ethics in research? And the second one I think you raised is, given the volume, many people don't get their individual voices out in research. How do we address these two?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no easy fix, right? There's no easy approach. It's always pretty much as in anything, you need to consistently try and, make steps along the way in fixing things. So I think various attempts in different ways to tackle things and make even a little progress generally is the way to go. For instance, when talking about ethics, recently in Europe's for this year had researchers write a statement of impact along with their paper, which I think is a good idea. Yeah, and this is like a research practice that encourages people to be conscious of these broader implications while not requiring everyone to make a deep dive necessarily. So I think broadly, yeah, things like that of just try to revise whatever system you have right now that has issues. Reviewing is also somewhere where Europe's made some changes, and I think we'll need even more changes soon. I think that's the only way, is think about what might work, try it, and keep trying.
How do we cut down the barriers? For someone who's not at Stanford, who wants to contribute to the field, your recommendations, because there's unfortunately some amount of recognition through the institutes as well, and individual researchers don't get as much recognition sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a mix of things. One of them is to make the classes and education much more accessible, which I think is something actually there's been a lot of progress on. So, there's Fast AI. Also, the classes we get at Stanford now are more often than not just public on YouTube, so anyone can follow along. So I think that's a great start, right? Anyone can sort of teach themselves. But to go beyond that and actually sort of make a dent, I think it's maybe we need more kind of communities for AI practitioners besides academia. I think there's a lot of people out there who might want to experiment and try things not necessarily within academia. And so far as an AI community, we haven't found the right way to kind of celebrate those discoveries and those projects. I mean, there's been some projects like the Oldify, for instance, that have made very impressive progress on some specific tasks, but because there's no paper and it's not within academia, maybe the documentation or the recognition isn't as present. So yeah, I think we need new sort of forums, new ways for people who maybe are more interested in just doing AI and not writing papers and not doing research in a traditional sense to still kind of share their work and discoveries.
I think that's also where Gradient contributes to. That's also Fast AI community's contribution with the rebels that are trying to do uncool research, making AI uncool.
Yeah, exactly. I think part of the solution is just embracing blog posts and everyone kind of being able to have a voice and write about what they're doing. And I think researchers writing blog posts is part of the answer too, is, make your own research accessible by, instead of having these PDFs and papers in the traditional academic format, in addition to the paper, actually write a blog post that kind of makes it easy to get into, and also makes it easy to imagine for someone who is not in academia, but they could also write something like that to share whatever they're doing.
Yeah, I think Jupyter Notebooks, again, Fast Pages is an answer to that, where you can intermix prose and code, and you don't have to be necessarily math heavy, because maybe I'm math illiterate, but the non-academic community that I've spoken to, they sometimes struggle with how rich the papers are. Maybe that's also an addition to the barriers for many people because they can't sift through so much research quickly.
Right. Yeah, I think the information conveyed in papers and the information that you actually need as a practitioner are a bit different. And so we need more than just a traditional paper format for conveying information. And Jupyter Notebooks is a good example of you can actually have, the code in line, you can actually have example outputs in line, and that's, as a practitioner, seems like more what you need than, for instance, a traditional PDF.
And it's also exciting for again an outsider. I'm not as smart as a researcher, but an outsider to see that papers are now also, at least with most of the conferences, you have the open source code also available, which makes it easier to experiment rather than just try to replicate the papers and feel really stupid when you cannot do that.
That's true, yeah. And it's funny you say researchers are smart because I don't know. Going back to this question of failures and process, I mean, intelligence is part of it to some extent, right? But a lot of it is just perseverance and like wanting to do whatever you're doing and continue to try. And so in that sense, I think people who want to get into AI need the same qualities. They don't need to be super smart. They just need to start doing things and to keep doing them, right?
Yeah.
And having the code public so that people can start fast and just start trying things out is definitely something that should make it easier.
Definitely. I know you have a positive outlook on many things, but I'm trying to pick critical points from you. Do you have
Sure.
any negative outlooks on reinforcement learning? Any things that you think are not so positive, so to speak, like not necessarily negative, but not exciting about it?
I mean, I suppose, you always want to have some negative takes because if you don't have problems, there's no research to be done.
Yeah.
So there's obviously sort of limitations that exist, and those are still very much present. So I think there's maybe a lot of research on games, right? On Atari and sort of simulated robotics.
Yeah.
Which it's actually, I mean, that looks impressive, but it's hard to say how applicable it is to the real world, actually, because in the real world, you can't have infinite data and so on. So, yeah, I do think there are some types of research of like RL with people in the loop, RL with real world settings that we maybe should be doing more of and aren't because it's hard. That's one, and then I guess there's the part of the problem with AI as a whole, as a field, is as we've sort of grown, there's a lot of research that's a little bit more incremental and less maybe out there or innovative, which is not necessarily bad. I mean, you want also incremental, but you want a balance. So, yeah, to be critical, I think you can always be critical of a lot of things going on in AI, including in RL.
Okay. Now, for a final technical question, what one best advice would you have for someone who's just starting this journey but is also getting heartbroken by the competition or by the initial failures that every single one of us has to go through?
Yeah. I mean, I think you ask this a lot as a PhD student, sort of how can I, be noticed when so many other smart people are doing things. And my personal take is you should really find a way to do research or do AI just because you want to and you are curious, and not to be seen or or to be better than other people. Because if you're doing this because you're actually interested in it and you just want to be doing the things you're doing regardless of how much recognition you get and how many other smart people are also doing things. It's always going to be easier. There's always going to be smarter people in the room and smarter people out there somewhere doing other things. And if you're coming in from a perspective of just doing it from a source of passion and doing it for yourself, you can actually be inspired by these people and learn from them and collaborate with them and not feel the sort of kind of self-doubt necessarily. So that's my personal approach, is to never compare yourself or see it as a competition.
That's an amazing advice. Now, for the first time on the show, I wanted to do rapid fire, and these are a few things that I've discovered through your website. So I'll give you 15 seconds because we're talking to Zoom, and Zoom has some lag. You shared you have 20 hours of screen time some days. 20 hours on screen time or 20 hours with the camera? Which one would you prefer?
I guess screen time, 20 hours of a camera sounds pretty tiring. I could do less.
Okay. Nintendo Wii or Xbox? Whichever model of either. Nintendo or Xbox?
Xbox. Too many good games.
Xbox or PC?
PC for flexibility.
FPS?
Yeah, for the power.
GTA or Red Dead Redemption?
Red Dead Redemption. Yeah, Old West. I was actually just playing it for a while here in quarantine. It was nice to be outdoors.
Call of Duty or Mass Effect?
Mass Effect, easily. Not even a comparison.
Okay. I'm Call of Duty Warzone Club. Last one, Super Mario or Pokemon?
Oof. I would say The Last of Us. Yeah, I'm more into the narrative, artsy stuff. So that's me.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I had for you. But before we end the call, what would be the best platforms to connect with you and follow your work for anyone from the audience? I'll have these linked in the show notes. But if you want to.
Sure. I'm somewhat active on Twitter. So you can find me at Andrey_Kurenkov on Twitter. And that's where I tend to post, whatever random blog posts or YouTube videos or whatever I'm doing, or papers every once in a while. So that's the main one. And you can check out my website at AndreyKurenkov.com for all my assorted research and blog posts and YouTube videos and whatever.
I've also enjoyed Skynet today. Would also have that linked in the show notes.
Yes, you can also check out Skynet Today, which is a great collaborative project with me and many other people.
Awesome. Andrey, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, and thank you so much for guiding so many of us through your videos and your blog posts as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was really fun, and my hope was always that these videos and blog posts are just useful to some people.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to give it a review, or feel free to shoot me a message. You can find all of the social media links in the description. If you like the show, please subscribe and tune in each week to Chai Time Data Science.